Welcome to another episode of RPMHD Live NHRA Race Recap. Mike D here with Dave W. Here to bring it to you live, talking about the NHRA DENSO Sonoma Nationals. Dave, you saw it. I was there. How'd you like it?
I thought it was just as great watching it from my living room on the big screen. I thought that the action was great on Friday. I thought that the action was even better on Saturday once that cold front came through. And Sunday was just full of surprises, just full of it. So I can imagine that when you were actually there in attendance, feeling the energy of the crowd, it had to be even better, considering how good it was just from my couch.
Yeah, actually, what I believe was the main shock was, if anyone's ever been to Sonoma, it's normally a hot day. The Friday night session is usually prime time, and it's usually great. Temperatures can be in the 60s, and you'll see real killer runs. The shock was Saturday and Sunday, especially Saturday, had a big marine layer overcast all day long, or for the majority of the day. And it really helped the races, where you saw big numbers in not only Q3 and Q4, but as well as eliminations on Sunday. So that was a shock for me. Another shock, and we'll get into this a little more, was I don't know if I've seen a more race where people lost on hole shots in every pro category. I mean, guys and gals were losing on hole shots left and right, and that was just insane all day. It was just a great day of racing. Probably some of the best racing we've seen all season.
It definitely was. It was very, very, very competitive. At least from my vantage point. I mean, you had guys going rounds that don't typically go rounds. You had first-time finalists. You had Ron August making it all the way to the semis on an absolutely astounding upset. I mean, it had all the storylines in all the categories. It was a good, entertaining race to me.
Yeah, and if we're starting with top field and starting off with Ron August, how about that Ron August taking out Doug Coletta, who is and was the points leader at the time. But not only Doug Coletta went out early, his teammate Sean Langdon was gone round one as well.
Not something that you typically see for those two cars, but especially in that particular weather and what the other competitors were running, it seemed like the track should have been tight enough to be really throwdown conditions, and they should have easily put a couple of low 70s, high 60s on the board, and didn't.
Well, it looks like, at least in Doug Coletta's case, they didn't lay up. I mean, I'm pretty sure they could have easily gone 74 if I want to. But if anyone's watched Alan Johnson over the years, he tends to challenge not only the car the other lane, but mainly the racetrack. And it looked to me like he was just trying to get all he could out of it, probably a mid to low 60 out of it in that run. And it just bit him. And he paid for it.
Yeah, and it didn't make any sense because really, I mean, you're not even at that particular point, the way that the ladder was laid out, racing for lane choice. You had the round two bye. You just got whoever won that round was going to the semis. So get it down the track, get the win light on, use round two as your test run because you have no opponent, and let's race for it the last two runs of the day. And it bet them. And, shocking, but it happens. I mean, that's why we race them on the racetrack and not on paper.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and we've seen this before in Allen in the past where he's lost to competition that he probably shouldn't have. If you look at Tony Schumacher's record, I think more like first-timers or rookies or guys who shouldn't have won against him more than anyone, and that's partly because Alan Johnson is just so aggressive with the race car no matter what round it is and cause him to smoke the tires. A person who had a get-right weekend, who needed a good right weekend, was Brittany Force. Especially facing Josh Hart in round two. We all know the point situation with Brittany. For those who don't, she has not competed in every event. Therefore, she must qualify or finish in the top 10 by the time we get done when they need to qualify for the countdown for the championship. And her defeating Josh Hart in round one was big.
It was, because they came in 9th and 10th. They're right at the bottom. And it was also big not only for that particular situation between the two of them, but also running very well this weekend and needing to point her way in is Jasmine Salinas, who did not run the first race of the year, but is outside the top 10, and her only chance of getting into the countdown is by points. So by being able to distance herself further, Brittany did herself a favor, but she is by no means safe, especially with Brainerd upcoming and points and a half at Indy. That battle for 10th is going to be pretty stout. And for Josh, he really doesn't have anything to lose because, he's been to all of them. He's going to be in there no matter what. But I mean, I don't know about you, but when it comes to be countdown time, if I didn't have to race Brittany for a championship and I could prevent it from happening, I sure would try to do that.
Oh, most definitely. And going back to Jasmine Salinas, I mean, we saw the same thing the weekend before in Seattle where Billy Torrance runs 370 and he had nothing to show for it. Well, it was the same thing for Jasmine Salinas. She goes 370, which was a very stellar run for those conditions and had nothing to show for it. She even left first. Right. Still had nothing to show for it. And anyone will tell you she doesn't leave first too often, but she left first and still had nothing to show for it. It's just the way the mile flopped on that particular day is unfortunate but true.
Yeah, and that puts her, unfortunately, with Brittany advancing and her first round loss. Now she's 123 points out of the countdown. And when we only got 2 events to go, 20 points around, because they may have full fields. They may be just right on the 16 mark. Everybody's going to make the show. So really, it's not like you probably don't have a chance of DNQ. Maybe at Indy. Indy's supposed to have a pretty stout field, so Indy could make or break somebody's countdown at that bubble zone. But for the most part, you're only going to make up at most 80 points at Brainerd. And, that's going to put you in the hole at Indy. So you have to perform at Brainerd, and you really have to perform at the U.S. Nationals. So the pressure is on for those teams.
Yeah, and pressure is definitely on, and we'll find out. I mean, we'll find out sooner rather than later. It's only within a month away from now, so everybody buckle up. And if guys like TJ Zizzo and Trick Tatum and some of those killer cars show up in Indy, it's definitely going to be stout and it's going to be tough. Another person who had a get right weekend, Tony Stewart, making it to his first final in a nitro fuel dragster. His first final in Sonoma nitro fuel dragster. He's won at Sonoma before in NASCAR, but never in top fuel. But talk about a team looking for a good right weekend, probably more so than Brittany Force was Tony Stewart, and he definitely had one this weekend.
Yeah, he did. At one of his better tracks on the NASCAR side of things, couple wins there. His last win of his NASCAR career came at Sonoma over Denny Hamlin on his retirement season. So it was definitely a good weekend for them. They were making consistent runs. They were getting down the track, and he was pretty, I wouldn't say stellar, but average, and if not consistent on his reaction times, because Tony's one of those drivers who can go out there and throw down a 30 or 40 light on you sometimes, and you don't really expect it. He wasn't that quick, but he was consistent every round. He was getting down the track. The car wasn't letting him down, and it was even all the way into the final round against Antron. He left first. It was only a couple of thousandths, but he had that little bit in the bank. It just wasn't able to hold on.
No, it wasn't. It looked like something gave way there towards the finish line. I'm not sure. Based on replay I saw, it looked like maybe the blower belt started coming apart. That's what it looked like to me. But speed was down a little bit, but up until that point, probably the last 300 feet or so, it was a pretty close race. And, speaking of Antron Brown, you look at what this guy went through on Elimination Sunday. Round one, his teammates are technical teammate, Sean Reed. Round 2, Steve Torrance. Semifinals, Brittany Force, followed by Tony Stewart, and he only qualified 7th. But he had a consistent race car all weekend long. 72, 372, 374, 373, 374. They just kind of kept it there all day. It's like a bracket car between 72 and 74, and they got him to win.
Antron is one of those guys that's really, really confusing because he's had a yo-yo type season, starting with decent success early, comes up with the big win in Chicago, follows it with a first-round loss back-to-back at Epping and Bristol, comes up with a decent showing at Richmond, wins Norwalk, back out first round at Seattle, back in the winner's circle at Sonoma. They just need to find the consistency to, not have the ups and downs if they really want to contend for this championship, in my opinion, because you can't have a season like that back and forth. Ironically, though, his season is pretty much on par with teammate Justin Ashley. They are only 1 point apart from each other in points, and they're not too far away from the lead, really, 158, 159 out, but also only 30 points away from second place, Sean Langdon. So it's not unreasonable that if Justin Ashley, Antron Brown, or Steve Torrance get hot these next couple of races, one of those guys can lead this way into the countdown and get the extra bonus points for being out front, which is not something you'd anticipate, but or expect this far into the season, but it's been an up and down season for a lot of drivers. And another one just to kind of keep your eye on. It's just a matter of getting that consistency down and getting rid of those early round losses.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I mean, they gained maximum points for the most part on race day with Doug Clitter and Sean Langdon going out early. They certainly did tighten up those points. Come countdown, I don't know. I mean, 6 races, first round loss, win, first round loss, win. It might have you there in Pomona if you kind of teeter-totter it. But who's to say?
I mean, at that point, you're basically just kind of averaging a second round to semifinal appearance every race, depending on how you do in qualifying too, because it's going to be getting to the point where that's something we haven't really kept an eye on as much in the regular season, but qualifying bonus points are going to start being huge. Qualifying position points are going to start being huge. And as tight as these fields are, a couple thousandths here, 100th there, you're getting yourself 4 or 5 more points on some of these other guys just in qualifying alone. And, that can add up to a round real quick.
No, you're absolutely right. And we'll just have to see. I think this countdown is just going to be as crazy as it's been the last couple of years. I mean, this outside of the Steve Torrence dominance, the last year or two is really came down to the Christmas tree. When you really think about it, little points in the Christmas tree and bonus points have really decided to count down in the last few years. You look at last year, though we look at Doug and Leah at the final race, final pair of cars to go down the track. You look at Leah's round 1 loss in Vegas the race before, and she gets to the semis there and it's over. There's your championship right there. So, I mean, a lot of people look at the championship as that goes down in that run, but sometimes it was a race ago or a race or two before then when you look at a race that you very well should have won and it got away from you and that cost you. That final round in between Leah and Doug, that was just a good old race and she lost. If you want to say she lost the championship, it was in Vegas, not Pomona. So you're absolutely right about how tough it is when it comes down to the end of the year.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Well, moving on to funny car. Tasker, Bob Tasker. The conditions, the unnatural Sonoma conditions, we're used to. Well, they actually said the racetrack was about 123 degrees, but it still had a lot of bite. It was just prepped so well that guys were still able to run low 90s, high 80 runs, which you don't see too often. Well, if anyone's kept up with the season, we know that plays right into the Bob Tasker team's hands. They love tight racetracks where they can make the power and try to run those big 338, close to 340 speeds. And it paid off for them this weekend. I know a lot of people thought coming into this weekend it would be the Austin Proc show, but it really wasn't. If you look at it, Austin kind of struggled in qualified well, but it was not the Austin Proc you normally see, and it was the Bob Tasker that they probably wanted to see.
I mean, it wasn't. Brock didn't disappoint in the ET department, that's for sure. But Tasker, man, a pair of 338s, and he said on Friday, he's like, if it wasn't for that headwind, we think we had it in it. And E1 on Sunday, he came even closer with that 338.77. So they were trying so hard, and I can't imagine how much anticipation there was in the crowd every time that car came up to the line. Are we going to see 340 on this run?
Oh yeah, I mean Friday night I was standing there talking to my dad, and I said, "You got to watch out for this motorcraft car." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because with the conditions they were on Friday," and I said, "They're going for 340. They got to be." Problem was there was a 15-mile-an-hour headwind. I don't know if that helped or not. I imagine it didn't help, but it probably helped add a little downforce. I know they said they raised the spoiler up just slightly before that run. Without that headwind, they might get it. I mean, they probably do get it, but it's coming. I mean, we've seen Robert Height get close to it there. I think because Tasker ran right before Austin Proc did in qualifying too, everyone was expecting maybe a high 370 or a low 380 run to be made. From what I'm watching the broadcast, Jimmy Proc and the team said that they just actually weren't aggressive enough. And who would have ever thought that Jimmy Proc would not be aggressive enough, especially on a Friday night session? That shocked me, and I'm sure a lot of people watching.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely shocking. I agree. I figured that a lot more teams, I should say, would have thrown down and the numbers would have been a lot lower than what they were. But I think it was J.R. Todd who had mentioned after the first session, the headwind made it a little bit harder for the glue to stick to the track because it was blowing when they were trying to spray it, so they didn't get the adhesion that they really wanted. And I guess, that makes sense. I can understand it. The spray buggies are out there spraying, but if the wind's blowing it before it's making it to the surface, you're getting some uneven, splotchy, patchy areas, and it made it a little difficult, more so than it should have been. I feel like for a lot of teams, that should have been a hero session for pretty much everybody that went down that track.
It was for Doug Coletta. I mean, if anyone missed it, that 364 was the quickest run of the year, going back to Top Fuel real quick. I mean, the guy qualified number one, he runs at 364, track record, quickest run of the season by anyone. I mean, obviously, the adhesion paid off at that point. But yeah, for Funny Car, things didn't line up quite right for the 340, but we did see some great numbers. Heck, we even seen an 83 out of Hagen on Saturday morning.
That was a bit of a shock.
Yeah, that really was. And once again, listening to broadcast and talking, I guess they had went back to what they know. They kind of went back to their old combination. They were kind of fooling around with some other stuff, trying to improve things. You know how the sport is. If you don't improve, you'll get left behind. And sometimes I guess they're taking a step backwards to go forward. They definitely went forward this weekend. They had a great weekend as well.
Yeah, and it's not something that you really – if you think back to the older qualifying sessions, he was one of the cars who you always waited to come up in line because you're like, all right, we're going to see what the track's going to do now. And it was shocking that he typically hasn't been that car of late. So when that 83 came up and it tied what Austin ran, it was a jaw dropper to me.
Yeah, no, it was to me as well, because once again, Matt Hagen has not been the guy this year where you said, I'm going to say, okay, let's wait and see what Hagen does. He's just kind of just goes down there and takes his mid-level run and calls it a day. But he definitely shocked people with that run. Me, definitely. And it wasn't a bad weekend for Hagen. I mean, he went some rounds. You can't really fault him. I mean, he had a decent weekend. It was just close racing all weekend long. I mean, he beats Jeff Dill with the 389, beats Chad Green on a hole shot, a 393 to a 391. Once again, we talk about those hole shot losses that took place all weekend. And loses the caps, a 393 to a 392. So great weekend for Hagen. I know they've been looking for that for a while. And it was kind of without John Force around. It was kind of the big four in the semifinals this weekend.
It really was. Just with Brock in place of Height, but it was like the big four of old.
Yeah, it definitely was. And speaking of Ron Capps, that was a guy who needed to get well weekend as well after what happened in Seattle. Guys don't know, according to Capps, they blew up the good car and ruined it and went to the old car, which they felt was not as technically advanced as the car that got destroyed in Seattle, but it definitely got the job done over the weekend. I mean, it was there to play.
Oh, for sure. And that was another surprise that Capps made it that far through eliminations, because he was one of those drivers that snuck up on you, but then goes out first round, drops down a 386 at 335. And it's like, whoa, where'd that come from? And he followed it through eliminations with a 390, 330, a 392, right at 329.99, just shy of it. The final was a little surprising and a little anticlimactic with, both of them with Capps puffing the tires. And basically it looks like Tasca either puffed the tire or dropped a cylinder right there. And it turned into kind of a little bit of a coast fest. So it was not what you would have expected for those two competitors going head to head.
No, I mean, if you're Capps, you're sitting there thinking, gee, just a subpar run gets me in and I'll win this thing, which is definitely what that team needed. But it was still a great bounce back weekend for that team. Once again, great weekend for Tasca. I mean, he did what he had to do, especially in that semifinal matchup with Proc. I mean, he rolled it in there a little deep, which is what he's known to do. I know Austin doesn't really care for it, and he beat him. I mean, on paper, he beat him on a hole shot. And when you look at it, because he rolled in a little deep, they probably ran within 100 for identical ETs or close to it. But, Tasca shortened up the track a little bit and got him.
Dove it right on in there, you bet.
So it's one of those things, and it's all fair game. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not illegal. I hear a lot of people in different forms of motorsports complaining about jumping or guessing at the light. There's nothing illegal with it. There's nothing wrong with it, people. What he did was completely fair.
And, I think that the other big story in Funny Car, aside from who came out on top, is who's floating around near the bottom, because their championship bubble battle is just as dramatic as Top Fuel. And Blake Alexander took almost nearly a major step back with that huge boomer on Friday night. That was a bomb like we hadn't seen from that team in a long time. And with the Sunday eliminations results, now he is in the top 10, and he's 5 points ahead of Alexis DeJoria. So you've got really between Paulie, Chad Green, Blake Alexander, and Alexis DeJoria, 8th through 11th are within one round of racing. Yeah, and you don't have to go too much further ahead. Daniel Wilkerson is only another 40 above that in 7th. So this battle can get pretty intense. Cruz can kind of step up, but he's 75, looks like 76 points back of 11th. So I think Cruz kind of doesn't factor in, but I don't think he really tries to, because, he's been to all the races, so he knows he's going to be in there on the participation award anyhow. So it's really going to turn into, and for that matter, it's not that Alexis is concerned either, because I'm pretty sure she's been to all of them as well. So it's basically Paulie and Blake Alexander trying to fight for their life to stay in that top 10.
Yeah, and Blake did himself no favors in round 1 with a 107 light, but being that both cars ran 390, Chad Green was 026. So even if you're 040 on the tree, you still lose. It was just unfortunate circumstances, but once again, Blake didn't help himself either, being 107.
It was a bit of a guess, and props to him for going down there and making that run after that bomb on Friday night, and then after pedaling the car Saturday in that Too Fast, Too Tasty challenge. He's like, I shouldn't have done that. I pedaled it, and I dropped all the rods on. I blew all the rods out of the bottom of that motor. So, it popped. It wasn't a body-destroying one, but a very expensive weekend for that team.
Yeah, I kind of held my breath there because I thought they might have cracked the body, but when it rolled past me going back to the pits, they didn't. So that was a saver right there for that team, and it worked out for them. But like you said, the points battle is going to be tough going to the next 2 races. I actually spoke with Cruz, and we can talk about that next week. Spoke with 2 or 3 drivers over the weekend. I got the audio, and we'll talk about that next week of what guys feel that their season is at this point, heading into the countdown, and how they feel. But on another announcement level, I don't know if anyone's read or heard, Jack Beckman announced today as replacement driver for the Peak Antifreeze Funny Car driven by John Force.
That's right. Fast Jack is back.
So I'm guessing, from what I'm reading, he's gonna make his debut, so to speak, at the Night of Fire, which Force team usually attends in Norwalk, Ohio, followed by the race in Brainerd, where he will be points eligible for John Force. He'll be able to accumulate points for John Force over the next 8 races.
Correct. And it is, to my understanding, at least from what I had seen, the precedence was set when Tommy Johnson Jr. filled in for Matt Hagan and he won the race. That went towards Tommy's win total, but the points went to Matt's win total, or points tally. So I feel like if Jack wins a couple races at the end of this year, it will add towards his career statistics. But I'm pretty sure, since all the points are going towards John, if Jack earns enough points to win that championship, it will be credited to John Force.
Correct. That is correct. So we'll stay tuned for that and follow up with that as it proceeds. Like I said, it was just broke today on numerous websites that Fast Jack Beckman will be the replacement driver for John Force for the remainder of the year. Pro Stock Car. Well, that was a race of hole shots as well. I don't know if I've seen so many hole shot losses or wins and red lights and whatnot that I did in Pro Stock Car. But at the end of the day, Aaron Stanfield, I believe it's his 3rd win of the season.
3rd out of the last 4 races, as a matter of fact, if we're looking at it that way. They are getting hot at the right time of the year, I think.
He most definitely is. He qualified 4th, beat Mason McGahee in round 1, took out Eric Andrews on a hole shot, 016 on the lights. Eric is 041 in round 2. Greg Anderson just annihilated the tires off the line in the semis, and he runs a 654. And then he beats Corey Reed. And How about Corey Reed, your second pro stock start of your career? You probably should have won the first round of Seattle, but he was safe than sorry. Pulled the chutes a little early, lost that race by a nail biter. Second pro stock race of your career, and you go straight to the final round.
You know who the last driver who did that was?
No.
Troy Coughlin Jr.
Oh, wow.
Made his debut in July of 2020 at the COVID races at Indianapolis. And in his second event, he went to the final round where he was runner-up to Uncle Jeg, who ironically, before Troy, was the last driver to go to his first final round in his second start at Houston in 97, but he won that race.
I remember that.
Corey Reed is in pretty good company with drivers to advance to their first final round in their second career start. Between those drivers, to be named with the Coughlins is a pretty epic list to be on. And I feel like, I don't know if anybody that tunes in play NHRA, the long shot odds that man had, not only to win first round because they do head-to-head matchups, but also the whole event. I won a lot of money from Corey Reed this weekend, so thank you, Corey, for that. I had faith, and I'm like, you know what? He was impressive, like you said, in Seattle. He was impressive in qualifying. He was the higher qualified car. I couldn't believe the odds that they had against him. I'm like, I'll take those odds, and he didn't disappoint. And he was only, a couple hundredths away, I believe, in the finals from turning on that win light and
yeah, he ran a 6
like Jag. I mean, he was right there with 55. So
yeah, 55 to Aaron's 54. I mean, it was it definitely, even though he didn't win, it was still his weekend. You can't take that away from the guy.
If you reverse their reaction times in the final round, Corey Reed's holding that trophy.
Correct.
The car is there, and I expect them to be instant contenders going forward. May not be a win waiting to happen, but this guy is not somebody that you can just take lightly as we're going in, and he can be a huge countdown spoiler.
No, he really can. And, I look forward to him making quite a bit of noise come countdown and hurting some feelings. If there was a guy who's still wishing upon any star he can to get his season turned around, it has to be Matt Hartford. For every good run he makes, it's one step forward, 2 steps back for this guy. And I don't know what's going on with that car. Qualified well. I think he was number 1 after day 1. And then it just went kaplunk on him. I mean, he ended up qualifying 7th when it was all said and done. Spins the tires right off the line. Jerry Tucker, that guy who's right there in the top 10 in points, who's been quiet all year long, just been hanging in there. Got rid of him early. Jerry actually went some rounds. Could have probably won the event. I mean, had he not gone red against Corey Reed in the semis, they ran identical 664s.
Yeah, and the thing is, the class is just so competitive right now. You can't struggle and lose a run in any way, shape, or form. Look at Mason McGahey through qualifying. I mean, he was having trouble just getting the thing down the track. Look at like you mentioned, Hartford having trouble. Greg Anderson out of nowhere, as he continued on through the rounds, I'm like, this got a little bit of a Greg Anderson feel. Just annihilates the tires. I mean, doesn't even make it 60 feet. This is really cutthroat racing right now. You got to be not only good with your left foot, but you got to get it through the shake zone and get it through down low. Otherwise, you're a spectator real quick. No,
you really are. Last topic I actually want to hit on, though, speaking of pro stock. Now, Eric Latino has had a great car all year. It's just been the driver. But you can't tell me, especially with that round 1 performance and who he was racing, that he didn't have a little extra motivation there, because that was pretty funny. And if you look at it, you see who he was racing round 1. And the guy probably cut the best light of the season for him. I mean, he was ready. He beats, for those of you watching, and I can't pronounce her name all the time. Is it Sienna? Wow. Wowgust. Did the best I could with it. If anyone's kept up with NHRA Pro Stock Racing, you know that Sienna was a member of Eric Latino's team, which formerly KB Motorsports. Took a little bit of a break there after 5 or 6 races and then moved over to Elite Motorsports. You can imagine that Eric Latino was not happy with that decision, and it kind of caught him by surprise, as was also said by Greg Anderson. It was caught blindsided by it. They meet up round 1, and needless to say, Eric Latino did not need any extra motivation on that run. That was something to watch. That was actually kind of funny. And I was actually near their pit area when Eric returned. And let's just say there were a lot of high fives taking place after that run.
I wouldn't be surprised. Surprisingly, when you look at the point standings, and we're talking about the KB team, Dallas Glenn and Greg Anderson have been the best 2 cars out of that team because they're first and second in points. And then it's all elite all the time, all the way down to Derek Kramer and Eric Latino at the bottom half, with Christian Quadra still in there. So elite has a bigger chunk of the top 10 than the KB cars are, but the KB cars have the top 2 spots. And the biggest shock, first round of eliminations today, or yesterday, or Sunday, whatever day it is. I don't even remember what it was. Dallas Glenn cuts the 64th perfect light in Pro Stock Eliminations history, goes on, thinks it's going to be another 00 Dallas kind of day, and for the first time in a long time, doesn't make the semifinals and won't be in the Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge. I believe it's the first time all year that he's not been in that Mission Foods Challenge, which is just absolutely staggering, but also tells you exactly why he's got a 115-point lead going into Brainerd and has a very substantial enough lead that there's a very real possibility that he can lock up the number 1 spot before they even get to Indy.
Yeah, and if you look at the bracket and anyone watched the show on Sunday, he lost in round 2 to Jerry Tucker.
Correct.
On a hole shot.
On a hole shot.
And that was the theme of that Sonoma Raceway all day long in all the pro classes, primarily Pro Stock Funny Car and Pro Stock Motorcycle, whole shot losses. And you go from 000 Dallas at that moment in round 1 to on the trailer Dallas in round 2 with that 060 plus light he had. And Jerry Tucker, I believe, was 021 on the tree and went ahead and got the win.
Yeah. The last time that he was out that early was the 4 wides in Las Vegas. But other than that, he has been a semifinal, final round, or winning driver the entire season. And it's one of those things that just kind of like quietly sneaks up on you. You know, we talk about Aaron Stanfield winning 3 out of the last 4 and the successes of the other drivers. You don't really realize it's like he's quietly just been putting together and building this epically consistent late round season, and all the Mission Food challenges that he's been involved in. Those bonus points obviously being towards his total at the countdown reset. He could potentially end up with the points lead and getting the bonus points that come along with that for the countdown reset. And you string together that kind of consistency over the course of those 6 races, this guy's your champ.
No, you're absolutely right. But we'll have to see. You know, things change in the countdown. And Erica Enders has a thing for waking up come countdown time. And don't look for her to have too many 040 plus lights when the countdown starts.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
And going back to what you mentioned with the Pro Stock points, I mean, from Derek Kramer, who's essentially tied with Christian Quadra and Eric Latino, and Matt Hartford, who's in 11th, Chris McGahey's in 12th, with Mason in 13th. I'm going to assume, I do not know this, but I would have to think that the Quadras will be back in Indy. I would think. I'm not sure. I don't know, but that's just guessing that they will be back in Indy, which will make qualifying and everything a lot more interesting. At this point, who doesn't make it? I mean, because someone's big is going to be out, whether it's Hartford, Latino, Quadra, Kramer, McGahey. I mean, if it's Matt Hartford, that'll be a killer, especially after how they performed last year.
But all those guys have all the participation points. So Christian's the only one that's on the bubble. All those guys are going to make it. You're only concerned if you're Christian Quadra is, I got to stay above the cut line. Right now, if they don't go to Brainerd, and Matt Hartford is going to qualify, so he's going to take 30 of those 50 points away there. If he goes around, he can tie. If he goes to the semis, Christian's out of the top 10. depending on, I mean, Eric, just by showing up and qualifying, or just by showing up, just getting the 10 points for Tech is already going to pass him. So if, let's just say, Hartford goes in there and goes out first round, goes out second round, it's very real possibility that he and Christian can go in there pretty much as a heads-up battle coming to Indy and going, whoever lasts further in eliminations is going to make that top 10. And for Hartford, it's not that big of a deal because he's raced for a championship no matter what. But for Christian, that's make or break his season. The next driver down that would have a chance to make it in beyond that, you'd have to go all the way back to Kenny Delco, who is 14th in points, but he is just shy of 110 points out of the top 10. I don't really see Kenny Delco making up that big of a deficit, and skipping the race in Norwalk is the only race that he has missed this season, and that will pretty much keep him out of the countdown contention. The other people that are below the line that we talked about, the quadrants, we got Fernando Jr., David Quadra, Brandon Foster. I think that those guys have an outside chance thanks to the 1.5 points, but I'm fairly safely guarantee that their seasons are done. And it looks like you froze up, lost the connection, whatever it may be. But it looks like I don't really see those guys stringing together, even with 1.5 points at Indy, even with all that's going on. I really think that it'd be hard pressed to see that they end up getting around Christian Quadra or anybody else at that matter, because you're not even, once Christian's out of the top 10, you still have to get your way around both of the McGaheys. You got to get your way around Hartford. I mean, that's a huge fight and a lot of people to come up with there. So I think that the real battle is just, does Christian stay in or does he stay out? And that's really going to determine what it's going to be. So looks like we've lost Mikey's connection for a moment. He'll probably be back here in just a minute. But, I mean, that's pretty much the summary of Pro Stock right now. A huge congratulations to Corey Reed. First final, second start. I mean, looked like a pro driving that thing. It took to what do they say? Takes to it like a duck takes to water, and becomes the third Pro Stock motorcycle racer to compete in both Pro Stock motorcycle and Pro Stock car. The other two being Joe Folgore and George Bryce himself, who never made a show, but Joe Folgore did. He and Corey are the only two to qualify in both Pro Stock categories in NHRA.
Well, I'm back.
Hey, he's back. All right.
I don't know what happened there. That was a rare technical
you froze and then you were gone.
Yeah. I thought you were gone and I was the one gone. Where are we at? Pro Stock motorcycle?
Yeah, we were wrapping up Pro Stock, basically just going through who did and didn't have a chance. The countdown's pretty much set, aside from Christian Quadra, if he's going to make it or not. And shout out to Corey Reed. And it was a good segue into the motorcycle category where he came from.
Yeah. And speaking of Pro Stock motorcycle, finally, Matt, after Vance and Hayes decided to turn their bikes down, just my thought, just my opinion, I'm going to stick to it. I mean, I don't know. I don't see those bikes. Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion. Matt Smith gets the win in front of Denso. He wins the call out in front of Denso, wins the event in front of Denso, does everything he needed to do in front of Denso, wins the race. Low ET, believe. Not sure if he had top speed. Salinas might have had top speed, but
Gianna Evaristo did, yes.
Yeah, she had top speed. So low ET, not top speed, but win the race.
So what you're saying is we came all the way to Sonoma. Matt sponsors the race. They had a big money challenge, and Matt left the sandbags in the trailer. Got it.
No.
You took them sandbags off. That bike ain't run that good in a year, if not more. So who took the bags off? Yeah, Matt Smith picked the right time to lay it down. That bike don't run like that. No,
that
sir.
bike's been running good all year long.
No, sir.
When it starts in 60 foot, it's been running good. It's been running good all year long. Yes.
Yeah.
When it starts in 60 foot, it's running good. But Vance and Himes, starting in Seattle, they decided to tie an anchor to their bikes. Granted, low bike count, You know, you got to do what's best for the class. You can't keep humiliating the rest of the bikes out here by having a full 10th or 700s on the field. So they decided to dial it down and create parity, so to speak, within the pro stock motorcycle class. And when there's parity, as we've seen this weekend, the better bike is Matt Smith. Don't be surprised if during the countdown, all of a sudden, Gage Herrera has 5 to 700s on the field again. But once again,
no.
Credit to Matt Smith for this great performance. He beat his teammate John Hall in the final round. Obviously, he had the bike to beat for once this weekend, and he got the win. Finally, I know they say he cries a lot, or the case may be, but he did what he had to do over the weekend, and it was pretty much a sweep for Matt Smith. When's the last time we could say that for anyone outside of Gage Herrera?
Oh, no, it definitely was. And I mean, like I say, not only did he pick the right time, I mean, won the Getrix challenge, Getrix call out. I mean, that's $25,000 in his pocket. Picks up the race win, picks up low ET. And I think that the best part, in all honesty, no matter what side of the fence you are on, I don't care who you cheer for, who you like, who you dislike, Gage Herrera gets up on stage. The first thing he says is, you know what, let's just go for it. Matt Smith, first round, here we go. And Matt Smith gets up on stage and he goes, leave the bags in the trailer, boys, because I'm coming for you. And they put together one of the best pro stock motorcycle races of all time, whether it was a qualifying session, the call out, eliminations, whatever it was. The two of them side by side running the ETs and speeds that they did. I think if those two motorcycles show up every single weekend in the countdown, it's going to be something to see. Gage had a little bit off the line. Matt had a little bit more in performance, a 66 to a 68, 203 to 202. I mean, that was a beautiful pass, regardless of who you were cheering for. Just as a fan of the category, they put on a show.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, I've said it before. It's like Schultz and Myers all over again. And that's what I look forward to seeing. I stated it last year that when Gage was dominant, Matt was on a Suzuki. And I said, well, when Matt's on the Buell, no one can back half with that Buell. And I said, I want to see the best of the best. We hadn't quite seen it yet until this weekend. That was probably one of the greatest, like you said, races I've ever witnessed. I'm not sure where the Herrera team was because on Friday they weren't at Sonoma. And if you look at Q1 and Q2, they weren't at Sonoma at all. I don't know where they were, but credit to them, they came out in Q3 with, I would say, not that much data, and just went for it and pulled out a great number. And they just got outrun. Something you hadn't been able to say until probably Seattle this year. I think Matt outran him, but he beat Matt on a whole shot in Bristol. But outside of that, you don't see Gage Herrera get outrun too much, especially by 200s. And
no, not at all.
Which was a great race, but also leads me to believe that there was a few sandbags on that bike. My opinion.
On both of them, I think they both left the trail going down the track. Because, man, it was so hilarious. Matt Smith's like, you know what? They've been telling me all year long, work on my 60 foot, work on my 60 foot. Well, I got my 60 foot back. Where'd your guys' go?
Yeah. And
but it's also not just a Gage problem. Richard Gatson was having problems too.
Yeah, and I spoke with Richard actually Sunday morning. And I actually have audio that we'll probably talk about next week. But on a side note, I asked him what was going on this weekend, and he said these bikes just have a mind of their own right now. They're not listening, and they're not racing in Brainerd because none of the bikes are. But he did say that they will be testing in Indy before the U.S. Nationals to try to get these things figured out, and that they're just not cooperating and listening at the moment. And that was
it's very curious. And I actually had a chance to talk to him a little bit after Norwalk, after the final round. They were all up there, obviously, for Gage's winner's circle picture. And he was mentioning how they had to change engines because he did hurt the motor in eliminations in Norwalk. And he said, you'd be surprised the different nuances, the different torque curves, the different horsepower curves that these motors have between them. And it's not just like you dump in another bullet and go. You got to tweak the sprockets, you got to tweak the gearing, you got to tweak a lot of stuff to make them get on the track and match what they were at. So, they're tinkering with it, but it seemed like beyond that, they seemed to have a little other issues. I mean, Gage's bike didn't sound healthy. Richards, I think, died off the line. I think it was in Q2. It just kind of launched, burped, and then shut off, and then they pushed him off. So it seemed like they were having some kind of mechanical gremlins other than just not being able to navigate the track.
Yeah, I mean, even after Q2, I was near the pit area, and they, I believe it was Gage's bike that they started up numerous times. Even after Q2, they weren't even running the rest of the day doing a nitro session. They were still firing up that bike with the laptop hooked up to it. I'm assuming trying to figure out what was going on with those motorcycles. But at the end of the day, only 12 bikes showed up, unfortunate but true. But Matt Smith finally got the weekend that he wanted. In my mind, he should have been had. I mean, Angie took him out, I believe, in Richmond or in one of those races, round one, which was unexpected. He lost in a whole shot to Gage in the semis in Bristol, but he finally pulled it off. I've been predicting this for the last 3-4 races now, and I thought it was going to be him beating Gage in the final round is what I thought it would be, but it didn't work out that way. But I don't think Matt's going to mind at all. I mean, he got the win, and that's what he was there for.
Well, and so the surprising thing was, as you look through eliminations on Sunday, and it made it very difficult if you play NHRA odds, or if you play the drag race bracket bonanza game and try and pick your way through the ladder, just even for fun. When you have such a short field, you get second round, semifinal, and final round matchups, first round of eliminations. I mean, who would have thought going into Sunday? I mean, a Chase Van Zandt, Richard Gadsden first round, not something you expect to lead off with. John Hall and Angie Smith repeating their battles, not something you expect to lead off with. Chris Bostic, man, they had a come-alive weekend, and that bike was running great. And could have went rounds if he didn't go red against Hector Jr. Awesome debut for Clayton Howie. And, of course, just comes up against Gianna Evaristo, who is really, really, really coming into her own on that bike. Gage Herrera and Steve Johnson, not expecting that to be a first-round matchup. I mean, Matt Smith and Chase Van Zandt, that's a final round anywhere. They're round two. John Hall, Gage Herrera. These guys are – I hate to say that the short fields, I mean, obviously are not a good thing for the class, but the way that it makes the ladders play out makes it's not just like you had a gimme first round. You have to earn your way through these eliminations brackets.
No, you're right. And credit to Steve Johnson. Well, of course he qualified. Only 12 bikes showed up. Right. 500 races for Steve Johnson, which is more than anyone else can say in pro stock motorcycle. I don't think anyone's right.
They keep saying that, but the big thing that I keep feeling like they're missing when they mention it is there's only been 512 pro stock motorcycle races.
Correct.
You got to give them, you got to have something to compare it to. 500 is great. You could say, nobody else did that. And you're like, yeah, okay, but in the grand scheme of things, what does that mean for the big picture? Well, the big picture is there's been 512 motorcycle races since 1987, and Steve's been to all but 12 of them. Yeah, now that is pretty impressive.
It's very impressive, and I believe someone called Steve a hobby racer. And if you make 500 out of 512, I think you're a little more than a hobby racer.
And I completely spaced. I should have texted you and known that you were going there to see if you could pick up one of those 500 Stars T-shirts for me. I hope he's going to have them in his trailer or be selling them throughout the rest of the year because that T-shirt was hilarious.
Yeah, I didn't get one. I did see the is that the thing where he had on his trailer where it was like the Delta miles and the can't remember exactly what it said.
Yeah, it was like, how many millions, 10,000 years cried by, I think he had Matt
I saw
on it
that
originally, and then not bad for a hobby racer. And,
4 million mile Delta, 3 wins at $1.5 million a piece or something like that. That was pretty funny. But hey, great weekend. Steve didn't go many rounds, but 500 is a huge accomplishment. Once again, Matt Smith beats his teammate, so to speak, John Hall, in the final round. Finally gets the win he's been looking for Denso and for Buell and for everyone. We got some time off now, man. We definitely got some time off. We can probably come back next week because I got some audio from some guys and we can talk about some things in the off week. But Brainerd is next. Well, Norwalk. I don't know if you're going to that. Are you going to Norwalk, right?
No, I'm not going to Norwalk. No, I was not going to go to that. I mean, there's drag racing everywhere. Yeah, it may not be NHRA style, but Norwalk, and close to me too. Norwalk's a couple hours south, or if I wanted to go about an hour and a half further west from here, Martin, Michigan's got the PDRA Nationals going on this weekend with some funny cars. The big match race between, I believe, Larry Dixon and Krista Baldwin. They usually have a 4-car booked in Top Fuel show, which used to run a quarter mile. And that's where, if you remember, Dom Lagata went 338 miles an hour in the quarter.
Yes.
But they have since shortened that back to 1,000 foot. They have taken that spectacle away. That used to be a must-see event. But that's okay. Still cool to see nitro cars anywhere you look. So, off weekend, couple off weekends for NHRA before Brainerd, but still racing everywhere. And like you had mentioned prior about Fast Jack, the Force teams, and I believe the Cruz Pedregon racing team will be down in Norwalk as well for the Night of Fire, yes?
Yes, I believe they will.
Very good.
Well, we went by pretty quick today. Only 50 minutes in. Same bad.
There you go.
Same bad at all.
We covered it all.
Man, and it was a lot to cover, but we got through it. It was a great weekend in Sonoma. I was glad to be there. Hopefully I'm there next year, which I'm sure I will be. Hopefully I will be. For everyone watching, I appreciate you guys. I told you I'd try to get some video highlights for you guys this time. I'm going to try to add more and more each week with different highlights and whatnot of things we're talking about, but this was kind of a starter for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm a rookie at this. I'm still trying. But to everyone watching, I appreciate you guys. And Mike D and Dave W, we will see you next week.
Thank you.